Good afternoon. I'm Gina Adams, the founder of Wareologie. For the past 7 months, I've been interviewing a variety of professionals on different hacks and solutions to thriving in life. As many of you know, I invented buttons-to-button magnetic adapters, sold in sets of 10. This is a simple way to retrofit button-up shirts into magnetic closures to make dressing easy. We are thrilled today to have Cheryl Crow, who wears many different hats. She's an occupational therapist, an adjunct professor at Lake Washington Institute, and the founder of Arthritis Life. This is a website platform with podcasts that help people living with rheumatoid arthritis thrive. Cheryl, thank you so much for having the time today, and I do apologize for the background. Cat would like some attention. Cheryl, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. I love Buttons to Buttons. As an occupational therapist, we're always looking for creative solutions to all these everyday living problems, and you've created something just so helpful and unique. So I'm really excited to get to meet you and share my story a little bit too.
Thank you. Absolutely. So one thing I didn't mention, of course, is that you yourself have arthritis.
Yes.
If you don't mind sharing with our viewers just a little bit about like what came first. Were you an occupational therapist, or did you have arthritis and that's what kind of prompted you to go into this specialty?
I had developed rheumatoid arthritis when I was in my late teens, early 20s. So occupational therapy is an entry-level master's at this point. So I got rheumatoid arthritis far before I became an occupational therapist. But I wish my story was more linear. Like I became an occupational therapist because of my patient experience, but actually I never got referred to occupational therapy as a patient, which is really a shame because when I ended up going to occupational therapy school 7 years after my diagnosis, I learned so many helpful tips and tricks for daily life. And I kept thinking, why was I never given access to these before? Why are these professionals learning it? And like, why was the rheumatologist not referring me to? So there's a larger problem there.
Right.
But my passion had actually previously been working with children with developmental differences like autism and Down syndrome. And I grew up with a cousin with autism. And so that is my main motivation in becoming an occupational therapist, to work in pediatrics.
Okay.
But now I've actually been able to combine my love of pediatrics with arthritis because I'm able to serve people with juvenile arthritis now, which is, 300,000 children in the US, far more prevalent than juvenile diabetes. And it's really a devastating autoimmune disorder that affects the whole body, not just the joints. So I became an occupational therapist initially to work with children with special needs. And then I transitioned to the arthritis space, to be honest, because I just saw there was such a lack of resources, even though arthritis as the umbrella disease, arthritis, that includes osteoarthritis, which is wear and tear, and then all the inflammatory forms, which are autoimmune. That affects 54 million adults in the US, and it's the #1 cause of disability in the US. Yet it seems that occupational therapists aren't quite used to our full potential in that setting. So that's why I created Arthritis Life, because there just is such a huge need for patient education, and it was just the perfect way to combine my life experience and OT experience.
That's amazing. And for people watching, to understand how massive this problem is, I happened to look up 50 million people is the population of both the state of California and the state of Michigan combined. Just to like visualize how massive. So you're saying 54 million people live with arthritis.
And in the United States alone, it's 1 in 4 pretty much. Wait, no, that's not right. 1 in 6, something like that. Yeah, I can't do the math.
Still, that's huge.
And
I didn't realize it was so prevalent with kids. And
Most people don't. And if they do, they think it's just, it's in your hand or it's in your knee. But it's a full systemic body attack, similar to lupus, where it's your immune system attacks itself, your healthy tissues in your across your body, lungs, heart, everywhere. But it happens to really attack the synovial lining of your joints, which are the the ones in the joints that move the most. So the distal joints of like your fingers and toes, hence the little fine motor activities like buttoning yourself and anything to do with self-care where we're really manipulating things with our hands. So doing your hair, doing makeup, bathing yourself, grooming, cooking, everything, you know, all your daily tasks, obviously dressing, putting those buttons on, zippers, you know, like occupational therapists really, our primary kind of intervention is something called activity analysis, where we watch someone doing their activity and we also talk to them about, you know, what's important to them, and then we help them problem solve their daily activities. But like in your case, it's such a perfect, you know, solution that you have created where, you know, I'm sorry, I'm turning this, I'm used to being on the other side of the podcast. So I'm like, I'm going to talk to you about your product. But yeah, so you've created something that just, what I love about your product, I will say, because I'm here, that you don't have to buy, like, you don't have to change the clothing itself. You're able to use the same clothing that you'd already purchased, which that's really like a win-win, because a lot of times people don't want to have to buy something different. Like, oh, I bought this shirt and I really like it. I don't want to have to then get a different shirt. With your magnetic buttons, you're like, oh, perfect. I can just put this on the button that I already have. So I love that.
Well, thank you. And that's really kind of my experience witnessing my father with Parkinson's was the inspiration, because he had accumulated a closet of clothes that was his personal style, right? And so this is kind of our impetus. Plus, I think that it's important that there's a sustainability component to that, so that people don't have to go out and search for different clothes that don't necessarily match their unique personality. But enough about buttons to buttons, because really what I love about Arthritis Life is you delve into not only the physical component of that, but the psychological. And so if you don't mind, let's just jump into the psychological component just a little bit, and some of the tips that you recommend for people who are struggling with this, because it is an invisible disability to a certain level. And so you don't necessarily always get the sympathy perhaps from people, because, you know, I'm sure a lot of people will internalize the pain that they're coping with.
Yeah, you've touched on so many things. And first of all, thank you for asking about the psychological, because there's still a stigma a lot of times in talking about mental health at all. But it is, you know, something that as an occupational therapist, I'm trained to look at the biopsychosocial factors. So the bio is like the physical, the psycho is the mental, and the social is like the, you know, your social life and social environment. So yeah, in my case, in Arthritis Life, I try to make sure that, so I'll step back for 1 second. I have an online course that falls under the umbrella of self-management, which is really the skills you need to manage your physical, mental, social, emotional life with a chronic illness. So it teaches you all those basics. So that's like my main product that I offer. And I like to joke that everyone wants the life hacks and they want the physical strategies, but my joke to myself is, my internal tagline for Arthritis Life is like, come for the life hacks, stay for the mental health support, because and it's almost like the life hacks are skimming the surface, but what's underneath is that even if you can find, you know, a life hack for every single activity in your life, there's still the mental side of, like you mentioned, coping with an invisible chronic illness that doesn't have a clear path. And I think that's the thing. So the uncertainty and the unknown and the unpredictable nature of the disease is something that I end up giving people a lot of coping skills for, because it's just hard. And I think a great perfect analogy is what we're all living through now with the pandemic, COVID-19, you know, all the work I had done previously when I went to therapy as a patient for anxiety around living with chronic illness. And then I ended up learning this skill called, or this therapy approach called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is, and there's a big movement in the pain world on pain acceptance. And it can be controversial because it sounds to some people like you're saying, just accept it and get over it. Like the word acceptance in this case is a mindfulness-based approach where you learn to connect with and accept just the present moment. It doesn't mean that you accept that these things will never get better or worse. You literally don't. You learn how to just sit with whatever you're feeling and tolerate it. I think tolerate might be a better word than acceptance to some people. But when my psychologist therapist first taught me this, I was like, why would I want to do that? Like, aren't you here to help me fix everything and feel better and feel happy? The problem is that a lot of the problems in our lives, whether it's like Parkinson's or a stroke or arthritis, they're not solvable problems. They're things that we can work around. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like you can't fool yourself into thinking that this is actually not a big deal, because it is. And
Right.
so it's really counterintuitive again, because I'm like a sunshiny, bubbly, happy person. So people are always like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, why are like, but this is so weird. But like the way that my therapist helped me see it is like the only way out is through. Like, you can't work around the sadness and the suffering aspect. Like, I've only been able to feel happy when I actually processed all of my sadness. Does that make sense? And angst and pain. It doesn't mean that like, oh, and now I'm over it, I never have to feel bad again. I still connect with that. And instead of just trying to reassure myself or feel better, I've literally just learned to identify. So, okay, I'll say an actual strategy. There's this thing called, there's in ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, there's this analogy of passengers on a bus, and that your thoughts are like passengers on the bus and you're the driver and you know where you want to go. So let's say what I want to do is I want to have a meaningful life, and I want to be a good mom and a good daughter and, a good person in the world. And so, but my passengers on my bus might be yelling things at me. They might be saying, stop, you're going too fast. You can't do it. We can't handle it. You're stupid. This is dumb. Like, so many negative things. Or they're saying things like, hey, go faster. You're awesome. But if we listen to our thoughts and like enmesh ourselves with our thoughts or believe them, then we're constantly going to be like swerving that, oh no, yeah, maybe I should take the exit, or maybe I should slow down, but we can actually just learn how to just say, those are just thoughts. Like, I know where I'm going. I'm the driver here. And I'm just going to identify the thoughts. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm kicking these passengers off the bus. Like, I'm not going to like squash them or be like, bye, because we can't get rid of thoughts. Thoughts are just internal stimuli in our brain. Right. So does that make sense? So you just learn how to live with your thoughts. It sounds so weird, because I think as a problem solver, I tend to be like, no, I just want to annihilate them, like make them go away, make the sad thoughts go away and bad thoughts go away so I can just be happy. But actually, you can be happy even with those uncomfortable thoughts. And that's what my therapist taught me, and I teach people now.
I love it. And I was literally just talking to my son this week about, we don't have control over the thoughts that come to our head. What we do have control over is how we act upon those thoughts, and what we choose to, let penetrate, or just move, blow it off and move forward. And like that, living in the present. So your program is acceptance and
yeah, it's I did not develop it, so I can show you a book. It is a formal approach developed by Dr. Stephen Hayes, a psychologist, called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, and there's multiple books about it. That the best one, in my opinion, for the lay person or like a patient who doesn't have like a background in psychology or anything, would be The Happiness Trap by Dr. Russ Harris. And it looks like on the cover, it just has like a picture of a smiley face. It looks like any of those like pop psychology books about happiness, but it's not. It's really good. It is really well researched. And he shares all these analogies and about how, suffering is part of life, and we can learn to live alongside suffering. We don't have to like necessarily have this hero's journey of like, I suffered and then I fixed it and I'm better now and now I'm happy. We can actually have a happy life even with suffering, and it's phenomenal. So yeah, my program that I developed is called the Rheumatoid Arthritis Roadmap, and it's an online course with an optional 8-week support program. So you can go through the course on your own and just self-study, like take it, learn about it, bye-bye. Or you can take the online course and still do your own self-paced learning, but then you can attend this 8-week small group support and education session where I answer questions and help people kind of,
Facilitate that. And people
yeah,
can go to your website at Arthritis
yes.
Life to sign
It's
up for this.
it's myarthritislife.net. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Fantastic.
arthritislife.
myarthritislife.net. And this will be available, of course, in all of the comments for people. But we're with Cheryl Crow, who's sharing
Yes.
with us her experience with living with arthritis, but also with helping others, because we know now more than ever, I think people who don't have chronic diseases, who are going through COVID-19 and really understanding the impact and importance of addressing mental health, not putting stigmatisms behind it as that it's a negative. It's just part of life. And I think that these support networks for people, that they understand that they're not alone, that these are normal processes, but if you have the tools and the support network to help you get through some of these roadblocks, it just makes life enjoyable. And at the end of the day, it is the journey, people. It's not the destination. So live for the moment. One of the books, I want to get back, who wrote Happiness Track? That's one of our
Trap, yeah, Dr. Russ Harris.
Okay.
I'm going to get out my little stack here. The other one that is written for professionals, but a lot of patients can do a little bit of it on their own, is Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life by Dr. Stephen Hayes.
Okay.
And then the Happiness Trap is, this is the illustrated version. It's ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, is a very metaphor heavy program. And so they have a lot of like illustrations that they get the point across, which actually is really good for teens. A lot of times teens like this too, as well as adults. And, can I take a quick moment to differentiate it from cognitive behavior therapy?
Please do.
Because everyone talks about, there is a lot of evidence for cognitive behavior therapy for coping skills, for depression and anxiety, whether you have chronic illness or not. But for me and a lot of other patients I've talked to, the limitation with cognitive behavior therapy is that it's predicated on you determining whether or not your thoughts are distorted or whether they're true. And ACT doesn't care whether your thoughts are true or not. It doesn't matter, because your thoughts are just there and you can't argue yourself out of them. And what tends to happen with straight up cognitive behavior therapy is that you are like, oh, like let's say pain catastrophizing. Oh, I'm in pain, and oh, I'm having this distorted thought about my pain because I'm worried. I've been labeled as catastrophizing by my therapist, because they're saying that I'm too worried about the pain, that my worry about my pain or my thoughts about my pain are out of proportion to the threat of my pain. But who's to say, right? If my thought is it might never get better, and the psychologist tells me that's a distortion, that may not be true. That may not be a distortion. It may not ever get better.
Right.
It may not. It may actually get worse. So we need to learn how to cope with that reality. It doesn't matter whether it's a distortion or not. And actually, fundamentally, you can't know in the moment whether something is a distortion, because all you know ever is the moment. So that's why I like ACT a lot more for chronic pain, because what Dr. Russ Harris talks about is the struggle switch. The struggle is when we struggle with our thoughts and we try to argue with them and say like, although that's not really true, or you find yourself doing this all the time, right? With coronavirus and the pandemic, it's like, oh, well, I'll probably be fine, or I'll wear a mask and maybe I'll be okay. And okay, I'm 100% pro mask, but what I'm saying is we try to reassure ourselves, but at the end of the day, you can never know for sure, right? So learning how to cope with uncertainty rather than trying to kind of trick your brain into feeling better is what works best for me. That said, for the record, if anyone's listening to this who is a psychologist, some people consider ACT like under the same umbrella of cognitive behavior therapy, because the starting point for both of them is to examine that what you're having is a thought. Like in cognitive behavior therapy, you do learn to be like, oh, I have thoughts and I have emotions and I have behaviors, and they're interconnected. And in the same way in ACT, you learn, oh, to identify I'm having a thought, but then you have a different process after that. So long story short, if you're like, oh, well, I already know this because I've learned CBT, in my opinion, it's a very, very different experience going to therapy with an acceptance-based therapy versus a regular CBT. And so ACT is known as a mindfulness but ACT also has a behavior component to it where you continue to engage in your life. It's not just about thinking about thoughts. Then you say, okay, I'm driving the bus, I'm actually going somewhere. And that's the commitment part. So you commit to your goals and take action towards them instead of taking action from like fear. Yeah, it's really cool. I could talk about it all day. I'm sorry.
I
I'm just
love that. And I love, the commitment to, the person that you want to be. You're not committing. You can accept where you're at with your pain, with your life, but it's that commitment and focusing on the mindfulness part of it and living in the present that I love. So ACT, if you're just jumping in, is acceptance and commitment therapy. And so we're here with Cheryl Crow, who's helping us identify. And thank you so much for that beautiful explanation and the analogy of getting on the bus or driving the bus versus just being a passenger. You are in charge. When it comes down to it, it's your choices and where you want to put your energy. And so it's taken me a lifetime I feel like to really understand that that I do have where I decide to put my energy is what we get in return, right? And so it's kind of like what you put out there, and so by focusing on the pain part of it, that pain might worse. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with our pain, but if that's where your focus is, then chances are that's, where you kind of will hit that roadblock perhaps. So,
yeah. And I was just going to add to that my biggest passion is helping newly diagnosed patients, because it's such a common experience for people to get diagnosed and then you get a 20-minute appointment with a doctor and then you don't see them again for 3 months. Like it's really a problem in my opinion. Like this system does not make sense. Like when I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes, when I was pregnant, I was immediately given an appointment with a diabetes educator, and they sat with me for an hour. They walked me through, they met with me every week. I'm like, why don't they have this for a chronic autoimmune disease? It's way more difficult for me to manage than gestational diabetes was for me, not for everyone. Right. But so long story short, when I talk to newly diagnosed patients, what I see them often get caught up in, which is totally understandable, they get caught up in this idea that their life was one way before, and now they have a different life than they planned. And they're like, well, I want to eliminate this pain that I have now. Like, how do I heal it? How do I cure it? How do I make it go away? So that's a very not acceptance-based mindset, right? It's very much like, oh, I just need to find the right diet. I need to find the right medicine. I need to find the right. And so it may be true that there is a medicine that works. And I'm very pro Western medicine. I've been on intense biologic therapy for medications for rheumatoid arthritis for 18 years, except for part of my pregnancy. And so I do make sure to preface this by saying, like, I wouldn't want to just be like, oh, I accept it and I'm not going to take medicine or do anything else. No. But I take the medicine, but I also say, there's a possibility that this medicine will modify the disease at a cellular level and make it less progressive, and that's my ideal. But also it might not. Like, again, that's an uncertainty, and the sooner that we can kind of accept the uncertainty element, because really certainty is an illusion. Like, and again, the reason I brought up COVID and the pandemic earlier is it's a perfect example of that, right? You can have your life all figured out. You had 2020 all figured out, and then something comes, right? So the sooner we can reorient our life to this, you don't have to like it, but it's how it is kind of acceptance mindset. It really has helped me.
And so people who are newly diagnosed, how can we get the doctors to refer them to My Arthritis Life, or so that they
that's really sweet. Resources? Yeah. And so it is a complicated process. In my case, yes, I'm trying to figure out how to summarize this. So my course is under the umbrella of general education and it's private pay. So I don't consider what I'm doing, like legally, it's not occupational therapy services. However, theoretically, an occupational therapist, if they were working with an individual on the same kind of topic, like self-management is something that we learn in school, any rheumatologist could refer to an occupational therapist after the diagnosis that's in their network, in their state, and they could, insurance could or could not, because of insurance, pay and reimburse for a session that's really individualized with an evaluation and a treatment plan and goals, where you say, okay, we're going to walk you through a day in your life. How are you going to perform these self-care activities? You're care of others, care of pets, care of children, all that stuff. So that's one option that is not being utilized very well. It is some places. Actually, I presented at the American College of Rheumatology conference to a bunch of doctors last weekend, and a couple of them said, most of them were like, I didn't even think about referring to OT. This was about the postpartum period, but a couple of them were like, oh, I always refer to OT. So some of them are doing it. It's just underutilized. It's same with like, there's so many professionals like counselors, social workers, psychologists that sometimes just doctors forget to refer to. So there's the awareness piece. But yeah, about my program is online, which a lot of people like, and it's convenient because you can do it from your own home, and you can do it anywhere in the world. So they can certainly refer people, or, it wouldn't really be considered an official like medical referral. It would just be like, hey, if you want to check out Cheryl's website, I have a lot of free education on there, lots of videos and tutorials and articles, but also I have the paid course and the support program. And that is, that's an option for people too. I designed it specifically for either newly diagnosed patients. I actually called it the beginner's guide to rheumatoid arthritis initially, but then I changed it because I've run it 3 times already. And then a 4th time was like the initial beta program, but I had a few people that had rheumatoid arthritis for over a decade, and they were actually some of my strongest testimonials because they had lived through the pain of having no support for 10 years, 14 years. And then they were like, had the same experience I did in OT school. Why didn't anyone teach me this earlier? So it's like the newly diagnosed patients, they don't know any better because if they're in my program, they're getting the support they need right away. Right. So, long story short, they can, I do, it's definitely available on myarthritislife.net. They can learn more about the course and see if it's a good fit.
Fantastic. So I would love to switch gears a little bit.
Oh, yes.
If you could share with us some of the techniques and tools and technology that you rely on that maybe people don't know about, and that we could share with our viewers, whether you're living with arthritis or have any sort of dexterity or physical challenge, what's out there that you just absolutely think everybody should know about.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of me being a little bit stubborn, but what I always do tell people when they ask me this question is the most important like adaptive aid or tool is your own brain. And that's because you have a choice throughout the day of there's 2 different approaches. You can, I call it like change the stuff or change how you interact. Sure. So you can change the item you use, like using a magnet button, or you can change how you interact with what you already had. So figuring out, let's say with buttons, let's say my jeans have a button and that's difficult to do. So I could change how I interact with that by changing how I grasp it, by using, maybe I could use, if my thumb is hurting. So for arthritis, a really common place, whether it's osteoarthritis, which is associated with aging, wear and tear on the joints, or rheumatoid or inflammatory forms of arthritis like ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, juvenile idiopathic arthritis, they affect that base of the thumb joint because that's that ball that kind of goes around and it goes all these different directions, like versus your fingers are more kind of like, down, up. Like there's all these official names for all this, but point being the base of the thumb. So if doing this hurts, you could also use these 2 fingers. Like you could change how you interact. So that makes sense. So, or change the stuff that you have. A kind of a blended approach for the jeans is something that I did. I know you have kids. I don't know if you like biologically had kids, but like I've taken a hair tie after postpartum and tied it around like through the loop of the jeans. If they're not fitting perfectly, you can take a hair tie and a little elastic. And I was like, oh, thinking about that later. Wait, this actually helps with arthritis too, because now I can bypass that buckling or that buttoning stage and then use the hair tie around. I was like, wait, I can't really demonstrate this right now because it's not appropriate. But I was demonstrating it on myself.
We've been looking at button adapters because that is a massive problem for people. And so the hair tie approach was, yes, I did have 2 children, and that hair tie rubber band trick is perfect for
it's so great what you have on hand. I didn't even mean to do that, but and changing what you use. I mean, the gadgets and gizmos. I think one of the most commonly helpful ones is a multi-jar opener. I'm sorry, I should have brought this over. I can see it in my kitchen right now, but not just one size, but there's ones that kind of have a multiple, looks like a little figure 8, and they have multiple sizes. So just opening jars is a very common difficult. And then simple things like, you don't necessarily have to look in the adaptive aid or gadget section, but when you're shopping, again, using your brain to be like, okay, like a pump bottle versus a squeeze for lotion, I'm always going to prefer the pump at this point because it bypasses the thumb. And and the pump also, there's these principles of joint protection for rheumatoid arthritis, which are you protect your tiny hand joints by using the big joints. So weirdly enough, if you don't even realize, unless you've like gone to OT school and had to like take a bunch of tests on all this, that when you're lifting things, you're using your back muscles. Right. You're not just using your hands. So if I'm doing like this, I'm able to you want to use big joints, big muscles, not small joints, small muscles for rheumatoid. It might be different. Let's say, if you had osteoarthritis in your shoulder, but your fingers are fine, then you would do the opposite. So,
I just want to point out too, I think using pumps for whether it's your soap or your shampoo is also better for kids because it moderates how much they're using. I think like my kids go through so much shampoo and conditioner when they're just like dumping it out of the bottle because it like too much comes out if they're pump. True. I think there's multiple benefits for the pump.
Well, and then a good example of like, so you can change what you use or change how you use it. So you could buy some sort of like special ergonomic cup or coffee mug, but also you can change how you hold it. So if I hold it with 2 hands, I'm distributing the force again across multiple joints. That's one of the good principles. Right. And also, think about gravity. If you don't remember on a daily basis, gravity is exerting a lot. So just try to hold your hand out for 2 minutes and then you'll see how much of a force gravity is. So just distributing the force across 2 hands, so much better than holding it like this. Ooh, ouch. Like, I mean, I guess some people probably hold it like this. That's not as good for rheumatoid arthritis. So you have a lot of, it's kind of like a teach a man to fish thing, like where, if you learn the basics of joint protection, you can then understand the theory behind why things like buttons to button work. And so then you could kind of make those little decisions and tweaks with your existing materials.
Fantastic. Wow. We could talk all day. And
yes. I'm sorry. The coffee is really going strong right now. Sorry. I'm just like, wow, I'm so excited.
No, it's fabulous. But, our time, it has been, I want to be mindful of everybody's time who's joined us. And so before we have to end, I was wondering, as an entrepreneur and you are juggling parenthood, 2 different, a company, plus you're an adjunct professor. Do you have any tips for us fellow entrepreneurs and mothers out here that you would like to just share with us in terms of like that balance and just like, really I tell people to breathe, just keep taking deep breaths and, living in the moment for sure. But, you've given us so many great tips today. I was wondering, as we kind of wrap things up, is there anything else that you would like to share? Obviously I encourage everybody to go to myarthritis.net so that
My Arthritis Life. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, myarthritis.net.
You're so good. Yeah.
But is there anything else that you haven't had a chance that you'd like to share today?
It's definitely still a balancing act that I am working on. I've tried a lot of different strategies. One thing that's ended up working well for me recently is taking dedicated screen-free time for myself, not just for my child, because he's 6 years old. Okay. And so we have screen-free afternoons. He has online school from 9 to 12, and then again, a little meeting at the end of the day. And the rest of it from 12 to 3 is supposed to be like a, on your own, self-paced, but we can do that anytime. So we try to take 12 to 3 as a screen-free break, because what I love social media and I love creating videos. I love what I'm doing, but if I don't force myself to stop at some point, it does become endless. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs say that they kind of get sucked into doing it all the time. And so I really had to be, at first I really tried to just be like, I'm just going to find a balance and I'm just going to do everything in moderation. But I've learned that I do better with black and white. Like you can't touch your phone right now. Now, those of you who are on social media probably like, I saw you on social media at 1 p.m. yesterday. I'm not perfect at it, but I try to take time away and also, yeah, just practice self-compassion, be compassionate with yourself. And another thing I'll say really quick is I have a friend who's doing a similar entrepreneurial journey. She also has inflammatory or autoimmune form of arthritis, but her project's about something different. But we both talked about how sometimes we focus so much on the future, we forget what we've already accomplished. So we're encouraging each other, like, look back at your testimonials, print them out or keep your testimonials in a folder, or like proof to yourself of what you've accomplished. Because if you're on this, what's called the hedonic treadmill, like you just keep turning the pace up on the treadmill, you're just going faster, faster, faster. You forget, like, oh my gosh, I've done so much. I've come so many miles. And people, like my friend was like, I've only had, 16 people take my course. I was like, imagine if you go to dinner and you get a table for 16. That's a lot of people. That's 16 like little hearts and lives. But if you do things online, you don't always feel that connection to the people. So yeah, figuring out how to connect to your product and the impact it's had is my second point. Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to finish my sentence, but that's hard for me.
No, it's wonderful because
my husband's laughing.
You're absolutely right. I will get so, it's a roller coaster, right? You have successes, but there are just so many just extraneous responsibilities that come with running a company. And those can be time consuming, the screen. Yeah. Sometimes we just can't avoid it. So two things. It's a great point. I've had to schedule my exercise. Because if I say, yeah, I'll exercise tomorrow, but if I don't put it on my calendar, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so just like this screen time, it's very challenging. I do like my new job where I've been helping out with some sewing prototyping. And so it's getting me back into a lab where I'm cutting and creating and sewing, and it's like, it's away from the screen, and I absolutely love it. But taking, if people are still watching, thank you first and foremost, but also those testimonials. I know people, you get your product, you start, whether you're training or whether you're, you get into your own kind of routine, and sometimes I'm my worst critic. Like, I get the emails like, please fill out this testimonial, and I just don't have time, especially if it's more than like 10 questions. Forget it. Like, I just don't have time to do those surveys. But the testimonials for me is what keeps me going, because when I read like, wow, this is an activity that my dad can now dress himself. Thank you. I'm just like so relieved that people are enjoying the product and we are making a difference, because at the end of the day, we're burning the candle at both ends. And the only reason we're doing it is because we want to help people and help people thrive. And, you saw an opportunity that was missed, like people who are facing their arthritis, whether it's for the first time or, like you said, have been living with it for decades. There hasn't been a support group like My Arthritis Life, so that they could learn tips or even go through an 8-week program to do some self-reflecting. And really, it's tough to deep dive into your own self. Oh, cute.
Sorry, I just want to show and tell also while you're talking. No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to show this also. Dog therapy is very helpful.
Exactly. Taking that time out to love your pets as well. It's just as good for your own heart as it is for theirs. So thank you so much, Cheryl Crow.
Thank you so much. No, this is
Again, I'm Gina Adams, the founder of Wareologie. And please take some time out of your day. I'm encouraging everybody to shop local these holiday seasons. Go to myarthritislife.net and give yourself an opportunity to do some self-reflection. It's okay. Go through the course, because I think that it's a really important opportunity for people to really be okay, be compassionate with yourself. And then check out your local shops, because man, people need this. We have to support our local communities and our local business owners more now than ever. I know Amazon is easy, and actually you can buy buttons to buttons on Amazon. However, you can also go directly to Wareologie.com. We have some new exciting products out. We've added stylish socks with loops. So if you can't pinch, now you can pinch socks. And we are now featuring Elba of London magnetic front closing bras. So it's another opportunity for people to dress and undress super easy.
How do they stay on? Oh, I want to talk about that more later. That's amazing. I get that question a lot about bras.
Right. So
I just bypass. Personally, I don't wear bras, but I'm lucky because I'm small. So I'm just a small person. So I know that's not reasonable for most people. So yeah, I'm going to have to try that.
Sharing, Cheryl.
Yeah. Oh, I have a whole video on that. Yeah. Not like a exciting video, but like I have a video talking about with Sarah Dillingham talking about.
We had Sarah on 2 weeks ago.
She's so great.
Incredible, great spirit, great personality. Can't wait to come out west and meet you both face to face.
Yes.
When it happens, when we can travel safely. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to sign off today, but please, everybody, go to myarthritislife.net. Check out Wareologie, and thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you. Oh, Cheryl. It's okay. It's okay. No, I answered to both. No, that's hilarious. I'm sorry. It's like wrapping up conversations is the hardest part for me. So I'm sorry. I was like 15 minutes too long. So thank you.